this computer. Okay.
Houston, we have connection.
We have connection. So, hi, I'm Margita Temple, and I am here to talk to you about fall cleanup. So fall is here, the weather is gorgeous, and it is a great time to get out and get working on your property and cleaning up your garden beds. But I, however, am very unhandy. But the person I was thinking about most when it comes to fall cleanup was my dear friend, Carla Mudry. So hi, Carla.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm good. Rosie and I are well.
This is Rosie.
And I don't know if your audience knows how far back we go.
I know.
I mean, we've known each other since high school.
High school, yes. I mean, and I remember meeting you at a very fun party, and many more after that. So I guess
you've been stuck with me ever since.
Well, you're as much fun now as you were then.
Well, see, Rose, I wasn't a damp rag. Mm-hmm.
And so
she thinks I'm no fun when I won't give her more treats.
Well, this is dear Rosie, who's had a rough time with it, but she looks great.
Yep, she is my handicapped dachshund. She had ruptured a disc, but thanks to Hope Vet and Dr. Leah Whipple at Berwyn Vet, she walks.
Amazing.
So we hope she has many years ahead of her. She's 5.
Well, she's quite a trooper. As you know, I lost a dachshund this year, my dear Abby, and she struggled with back problems, but not the same way, and that's not what took her. But
now, was she a gardening dog? Because my dogs like to come out in the garden with me.
No, she would go outside and she would just squat and do her business and run back inside and want to go back to sleep. She was a very quiet dog, a very easy dog.
Yeah, well, somebody today dug up one of the tree peony roots that I just planted, and I had to replant it, which really didn't leave me very happy. I don't know if it was a dog or a fox or something, because, you know, I live half in the woods, as you know, so it's like Mutual of Omaha's Wild Kingdom. The deer and I have detente right now because there's 5 of them that live in the back of the woods that I see every morning, and they look at me and they're like, "Oh, you still see us?" I'm like, "Uh-huh."
No, when I lived in Fort Washington, they would come very close to the house, and that's a whole nother topic.
My friend Kat had wild turkeys in her garden.
Where?
Kat, my friend Kat. And I just remember there were times like they would have to wait to get out of the cars because apparently the turkeys like to, I guess they must like to peck shiny things. Mm-hmm. But, you know, I feel really lucky to garden with nature, even though it drives me crazy sometimes, because I have great birds and everything else.
I know. And
I like, you know, and it's fun. You try to plant, that's why when they encourage you to do native, when they do native species, it's because, you know, it helps your birds and your critters. Okay, well, I better let you.
No, I just want people to know who you are. So while you're telling us that little story, I am moving on to show your profile, and not only are we really long-term friends, but you are a well-known gardener and blogger, and you have quite a following on Facebook for your
which is so weird to me because I don't even think about it. You know, I started Chester County Ramblings gardening group on Facebook because when I moved out here, I didn't find any gardening groups that were, you know, some of them are too preachy. Mm-hmm. And I wanted one that was fun, that people of all levels of experience could learn from and share stuff. And I know it sounds silly, but it amazes me when I look at all the people that like it, and it makes me really happy.
Oh,
because
it should.
You know, my earliest gardening memories were with my father and grandfather in Society Hill, and I think I told you this story. I was like around 3rd or 4th grade. I planted my first little herb garden, a John F. Kennedy hybrid tea rose, and a Roma tomato, plum tomato. Mm-hmm. And, you know, from there, it went to high school. I was a Shipley sprout. And then I had the, I'm not helping you in the garden years with my parents because, you know, face it, we were slave labor for leaves.
Yes.
And then I started to garden again when I was working in New York because I was commuting from New York to Philadelphia, and it was a way to relax. And I loved my parents' garden. And when they decided to downsize and move to a smaller townhouse in Philadelphia, you know, it was hard to leave that garden. So you go through, you know, the decades in between, and everywhere I've lived, I've gardened. And this garden now in Chester County is a little bit of every garden I've ever gardened in, and influenced by a lot of, you know, gardens I've seen that are special, or, you know, horticulturalists like Jenny Rose Carey with the Hort Society, who is the executive director of Meadowbrook Farm, and which is still open a couple more weekends. People should really go. It was Mr. Pennick's house. It's gorgeous.
Well, you know what?
And
I'll post that when I post. I'll post
yeah,
information.
and she wrote this book called Glorious Shade, and this is my biggest shade garden. And I know, you know, like you have like shady spots, like this has shade in woodland gardens properly. It didn't when I moved in. It was sort of feral and overgrown. And the first gardening book I used actually belonged to my late mother-in-law because she was a big gardener. My husband laughs that he said, you know, he grew up with a rabid gardener and then he married one. And I remember it freaked him out one time. Go away, lanternfly. Excuse me. Because it was when he realized I was like obsessing over this Japanese maple, and I didn't realize his mother liked Japanese maples so much. I mean, it was just one of those really funny things. But Jenny Rose Carey introduced me to a whole world of plants I hadn't thought about, like witch hazels. Thanks to her, I have a little bit of an obsession. And then there was a garden writer who wrote for the New York Times and like Good Housekeeping. She wrote several books. She was known all up and down the East Coast. She lived in Oyster Bay, named Susie Bales. And I had picked up one of her books somewhere, and I just loved it so much. I wrote to her. Well, she wrote me back. So for the last few years of her life, we would swap emails. She was like my gardening pen pal. And she sent me 3 more of her books. And she really got me to look at 4 seasons of gardening. It's not that you're sort of out there all year round if you really like to garden. I mean, you just are. But it's the whole thing of having interest in all 4 seasons. So it's not just like you have a dead season and then you wait for spring. And
interesting, because I think a lot of us think of it as being a dead season, and that we garden. No, I mean, gardening for the summer.
Yeah, if you look at the winter garden, it's very interesting, but it's more structural. You know, think of it like modern art. You know, it's form. It's not the flowers. And right now, what I'm trying to do, like this morning, I planted a whole bunch of bulbs, and I have more to do. And I planted 2 hydrangeas, and it's over in this bed that's on the edge of the woods I call the Derico garden, because when we had those Derico winds in June.
Did you lose a lot? Yes, you did.
I lost there was stuff from my neighbor's woods and my woods that came down, and it created a space. So I decided to put another shade bed back there, and I'm trying to finish it out. And it's sort of an experiment right now. I don't know what will last through the winter. It just depends what kind of winter we have.
Right.
But, you know, it's fun stuff like that. Like my tea camellias came today. There's this camellia forest nursery.
I love a camellia. I had one in Fort Washington, but it's a southern plant, though. I know very little about gardening.
No, it is not a southern plant. There are plenty that can take. There's some that were developed right at Morris Arboretum, and I have 2 of them. One's called Meadowbrook and one's called Balustrade. Okay. They're red, and I got them from Camellia Forest Nursery, which is a plant nursery I use in North Carolina. And they, you can plug it in by color, by zone, and they'll tell you which is more winter hardy. So I have a couple more things from them to go in because I'm kind of obsessed with the tea camellias, which when they mature, I can actually pluck the leaves and dry them and have my own tea. And I have one is called Sochi from Russia, and the other is a Korean mountain tea plant. They're tea camellias. They have, I forget what the
invite me over and I'll share tea with you.
But yeah, so I'm doing that. I'm planting my bulbs. I discovered I like, bulbs are something you want to spend money on, like my hydrangeas, which are an obsession. And I cut them in the fall and I put them in floral buckets on my front porch.
Right.
Because
go ahead.
The colors as they change are so pretty.
Look at them. They are absolutely beautiful. And
when you're cutting off the blooms, you're giving them a little bit of a prune, but not so much that they might be mad at you.
Right. So this is sort of one of the first of your recommendations of what to do in your fall garden.
Yes. And then my other big thing, which comes next, is the leaves. You see the leaves floating down behind me is, people like to rake them up and then they quick drag them to the curb so their townships can suck them up or take the bags. Put them on your flower beds because they break down, they enrich the soil. That's another thing I learned from Jenny Rose Carey because she was talking about this leaf shredder, and it's fun because I am bad with anything that is a power tool. And you put it over like this big bucket or a trug, and you have to wear goggles and you have to wear, the earphones, but you just throw the leaves in and they shred into leaf mulch. And then it's this nice light layer that you can put on your flower beds. We use all our leaves, because if you think about it, where's nature. One of the best soil you're going to find is in the woods. And that's why.
Right. I mean, it's nature's blanket, right?
It is nature's blanket. And I don't rake them up in the spring. It's food for the flowers. And as far as mulch goes, people are going to hate me for saying this, but please don't waste your money buying dyed mulch. It comes off on your animals' feet, your children's feet. And there's nothing about that dye that's found in nature. How
would somebody know it's dyed? What color would it be?
Oh my God, they're like black or fake red. Or it looks like cartoons when it goes down on a flower bed. It's unnatural. I think it's become sort of a fad because like a triple shred or even a hardwood, it fades as it sits down, but it's breaking down. It's doing its job. It's not supposed to sit there and look like you colored it in with a Sharpie pen. And also because I live in the woods, I get lots of tree work. And when they're here, because we're mostly hardwoods, they will chip a good bit of what they trim, and those are the wood chips that I use as my main mulch. And I also recommend that because it's great. I don't have a lot of fir trees, so mine is all hardwood. But a lot of people like doing that with their fir trees, especially if they have big acid beds with, that'd be plants like rhododendrons and azaleas, camellias, acid-loving plants, lilacs. And then, I already mentioned I'm planting bulbs.
And I call it squirrel candy. That makes me laugh. I love how you call it squirrel candy.
Tulips are squirrel candy for me.
I
used to get so upset, and I'm like, okay, I just give up. And I fell in love with daffodils, and I joined the American Daffodil Society, which is one of the best bargains in garden anything. And this nice older man from upstate Pennsylvania is sending me bulbs from the 1700s called Sulphur Phoenix that I bought from him. It's like Alice down the rabbit hole. I've gotten into heirloom bulbs a little, and I don't really know. I just buy them because I think they're pretty. And then I also think it's cool. It's kind of like native plants. I like the idea of putting something with a history in my garden, which is why I do all old garden roses or David Austin's, which are descended from old garden roses. So I discovered this new bulb place called QDAFs. They're out of Connecticut. They import from the Netherlands. And it's qdaff.us is the website. And the gentleman that owns the company used to work for Color Blends, which is another bulb grower from Connecticut that I buy from. And I got all these really cool antique and vintage bulbs, like one called British Charm, which is pre-1938, and another one called Moscatus, which is from 1762.
Wow. It's like peering back in history.
I know, it's like my garden history. And then there's a place in, I think they're Wisconsin, that does heirloom bulbs. Hang on, let me tell you what their name is, because I always get it wrong. And in between, I also use Brent and Becky's bulbs out of Virginia. Old House Gardens heirloom bulbs. And they not only do things like daffodils, but a lot of people that like lilies, as in, you know, Oriental lilies and Asiatic lilies and dahlias. They are propagators and savers of antique and heirloom. And it's just, you know, the more you garden, you discover all this really cool stuff. So you don't have to just go to Home Depot.
You know, and I think that what I would love is to get that information, and I will try to post that information too, because too many of us think of just going to the big home stores too.
Well, and with COVID, a lot of people discovered my friends from Lancaster at Bloombox, because they deliver to your part of Montgomery County. They deliver out here. They even deliver into Philadelphia. And they have these great connections with smaller nurseries up and down the eastern seaboard, including a lot that do native perennials. And I love them. Chase and David have such an eye, and I have gotten wonderful plants from them. And they also feed my chili pepper habit, because I grow my chili peppers. I found they like to grow in containers. So I grow them on the deck because I don't have tons of bright sun. So, and all sorts of cool tomatoes, like Midnight Snack, which is this deep purpley red cherry tomato that it's not as acidy and it has a slight sweetness to it. So
yeah, I'm a tomato purist. I just love just a plain tomato.
And since I'm planting, I forgot to tell you that I heard this thing, Adam Frost, who's one of the Gardener's World, the BBC shows presenters. He talks about planting in more of a square hole versus a round hole. Because, you know, some things are pot bound when you're putting them in later in the season. And it's so weird, but it totally makes sense. And I did it this morning with my 2 hydrangeas, because they were slightly pot bound in their pots. So it gently teased the roots open. And the theory with the whole idea of like a more square hole is that it doesn't do the whole roots around the root ball kind of thing. And hopefully they'll stretch out.
So this is a great time to plant your shrubs and trees. And so, but when you do so, you're saying to plant at a square hole, not round. And it always is a lot bigger, like at least a foot or two, maybe bigger than the bowl.
Well,
like
no,
a foot.
I don't necessarily do holes that much bigger. I mean, you know, I might do like the width of the pot bigger, but I'm lazy. I don't always necessarily do a super big hole.
Well, and it
depends what the soil is like. Like if it's an area, because even though the soil's pretty good here, there are some areas that were like dry and like a rock, and others that had a lot of clay content. So if I'm amending the soil first, my holes are bigger, because I'm adding mushroom soil, I'm adding compost, I'm adding bone meal, I'm adding blood meal, you know, all sorts of stuff.
It sort of aerates the soil for the roots to grow, as well as feed
especially them. Like my bigger holes if I'm planting roses. And it's a great time to still plant roses now. And October is also a good month to give them a little bit of a trim so they don't get whipped around in the winter by the wind.
So the person who may have just bought a home or and has a rose bush and is looking, okay, now I'd like to trim my roses. They may have gotten
they have to know.
So simply, and I guess briefly as you can, is sort of where's the best place to trim and how far down?
You always cut down to like a 5-leaf node. But the thing is, you have to know what kind of rose it is first. You know, like my roses are fine to prune in October. I plant antique, old fashioned, and David Austins. But, you know, there are people that move into places that, you know, developers have like plopped
knockout roses or something
knockout roses and stuff like that. And you have to read the instructions and look that up, because I will not grow those roses. And I've heard from people that you have to kind of prune them a certain way and only at certain times.
Okay, that's a good tip. At least,
but you know, Google is your friend. You look up things on, you know, Fine Gardening magazine has a website with wonderful stuff to look at, and Gardener's World from the UK.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's this website called The Spruce. And I find great gardening articles on that, and sometimes recipes too.
Everybody loves a good recipe.
And there's a website called Dave's Garden, I think it is, and it's always lots of stuff. And yes,
so don't be boring, right?
Well, you know, you don't want to just plunk a mum in a pot. You want to add other stuff. So you can see I have fall, you know, the annual rudbeckia and salvia in with my mums. And then the other picture you're looking at is a pot of fall pansies. And I don't always do fall pots. I just was inspired by Bloombox to do fall pots this year, because when they started posting their mums, I'm like, oh, they're so pretty. And then I always have pots of herbs around all over the place. That's a native, what is that? Bergamot and thyme. And when I empty the pots, I'll put those in a flower bed somewhere. I have, you know, I have herbs everywhere.
Yeah, I love planting herbs. That's probably the only planting I do, is that I love having an herb garden right outside my door, the kitchen door, because I just do a lot of cooking and
yeah.
I want it at my fingertips when I want that herb.
I also just like the way they look. Like you see in that one pot, I have a little mum with a rosemary. And that pot had something else in it, and I forget. It might have been a salvia that was spent. So I yanked that out and put in a little tiny mum. And now you have, you know, fun stuff. Like I even plant celery in pots. Well, celery's really pretty growing. And you still should weed. It'll save you some headache. And if you don't have a good arborist, find yourself one, because that is a very valuable asset to your property or your trees. And it's less expensive to get them pruned properly than it is to deal with an emergency tree removal when you didn't prune it and something comes down.
That's a good tip.
I use Tremendous Tree Care. They're out of the Wilmington area, so they don't serve everyone, but they have a pretty wide territory. And, you know, they're licensed. Whoever you use, they have, you know, should be able to provide you with references, their full insurance coverage, and that they are certified arborists. Because you don't want just somebody that's a tree cutter. You want an arborist, that they know about the tree health and they know about the health of your shrubs. They're a very handy tool to have.
I think that's great.
So, you know, and these are a couple pictures from my garden. On the left, that was a 320-foot red oak that went all the way over the house. So we had to take it down. And Marty Long, who did the hares at Stoneleigh and many other wood sculptures, he carved our owl. And the other side of the owl is a green man. And he's like our wood sentinel.
I love it.
And then I just have a Buddha problem. So I have a bunch of Buddhas all over the place. And the squirrels and chipmunks like sitting on Buddha's head.
Right, the squirrels.
I don't know why.
Well, but, you know, maybe he's praying too.
Yeah, but it's all about adding personality. Like, you know, the thing about, that's why it's good to garden yourself. Sure, you can have somebody do it for you, but there is this thing about connecting to nature and the earth and creating something on your own that is so important. And it's good for your head. I work out everything in the garden. You know, it's just one of those weird things. I go out, and if I'm like stressed from work or anything, you come in and you're just like, my husband laughs at me because he's like, you've been in your happy place. Well, but like it does make you feel better. It is actually, they prescribe it in the UK for good mental health.
Yeah, well, you're also outside, you're getting vitamin D, which is really great for your immunity and for your serotonin, and it's all good. And
but there, it's that thing. It's the literally digging in the dirt. I mean, it sounds so hokey, but there really is that connection to the earth. So I guess that's pretty much, you know, it in a nutshell, me talking too much.
No, you're not talking too much at all. No, don't apologize. I thought I had another picture, so I forwarded the slide way too soon. So I'm sorry about that. I actually wanted to ask you what your favorite place in your garden is.
I don't know. I like different spots for different reasons. I've created a lot of little seating areas with vintage seating. I have a cast iron bench problem and an old cement bench problem. It's just, I like in the front gardens in the morning, it's because I have a little table with one of my chairs and these little wrought iron settees. It's a great place to sit. Will you go away, spotted lanternfly? It keeps coming back. I'm gonna have to kill it. It's a great place to sit and have coffee. Like I sat and talked to my friend Stevie this morning when we were, you know, because she was having coffee, and we'll have like coffee together and talk some mornings. And I did it in the garden this morning because I had gotten out there early and I was covered in mud, so I didn't want to have coffee inside. But then in the afternoon, I like being under my trees. So I like to sit on the deck and watch the birds, or sit down in the shade gardens and watch, you know, the birds, squirrels. I mean, it sounds like it's funny. It's like my little zoo.
Well, I just am so thankful that you shared your garden stories and your love of gardening, and actually a partial view of your backyard and how beautiful it is. And I am also so proud of you of all that you've accomplished, even not only with your Facebook group, but you were recently, or I guess you've been recognized several times in Fine Gardening magazine for a garden photo of the day. And you are a very good photographer too.
Yeah, thank you. It's just one of those things that was like Fine Gardening magazine that was the first gardening magazine I ever discovered years ago. And I've been a subscriber for decades. And I think it's the best of the US magazines. But you also can't discount, if you join the American Horticultural Society, they also have a publication. And our own Pennsylvania Horticultural Society also has a great magazine. You know, there are a lot of things out there for all levels of gardeners. And I suggest like the Hort Society and places like that, and the arboretums. I belong to Jenkins and Scott and Swarthmore. And they offer programs all year round. Mars Arboretum does as well.
Yep.
And it's a great place to learn. You know, and I go to the plant sales. Like I got a Franklinia tree from Bartram's garden, you know, the source where John Bartram lived and, you know, where he named his tree. And they also have wonderful plant sales.
No, you're right. You know, if you really want to learn more about gardening and sort of join a community, it starts in places like that. And joining a Facebook group of Carla's Facebook group, Chester County Ramblings
Gardening group,
and going and visiting other gardens and reading and you know, just
I'm a home gardener. I'm self-taught. I'm not a master gardener. They have an amazing knowledge base, but I remember when I was starting out, that was a little intimidating for me. So,
well, you got to start somewhere. So just well, this has been great, and I know that we could definitely do more topics even on, you know. I just love chatting.
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to do that depending on what, you know, your viewers' interests are. I am not very good at filming and doing. I can sit and tell you about stuff and show you pictures.
This is just perfect. So,
you know, some people are very talented that way. I am not. Like, you don't want to give me a selfie stick because I'll just get the back of my head.
All right. Well, we'll just close this out, and I just want to let people know that I'm Margita Temple, and I'm realtor with Berkshire Hathaway, and I love helping people buy and sell homes. Also, I am never too busy for a referral. And thank you so much, Carla. This has been so much fun.
It was fun.
It was just great fun, and I look forward to doing it again soon. And Rosie, goodbye.
Bye, Rose.
The other dogs are doing that too. So thanks again.
Hey, did it record?
No, yep, we're still on. So we're gonna say goodbye.
Okay.